Okay, let's leave the stick figure examples for a while and let's go on to drawing cars. We used this example in one of the labs where we were drawing a little car, and we wrote a function to draw the car relative to this top left position of the car. And so we specified this one position, and the rest of the car was drawn relative to that position. So down here I have a function, draw cars, which is drawing 3 cars, each one of them 150 pixels to the right of the next car. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to draw a line of cars horizontally, so horizontally spaced. Okay, so when I see something like this, where I'm repeating a line over and over again, perhaps with something slightly different as parameters, I should be thinking loops. This is a repetition task that I want to do. I want to draw 3 cars, or I want to draw 5 cars, or I want to draw 15 cars. Something that I want to do over and over and over again, my mind should immediately go to, can I use a loop to do this? Well, of course we can use a loop to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a for loop because I'm going to specify the number of cars that I'm going to draw. So I know how many cars I want to draw. Let's say I want to draw 5 cars. So for I in range 5, it will do it 5 times. Then I'm going to call the car function with some different x parameter each time, because the only thing that's actually changing here is the x parameter. The y is going to stay the same. I want to draw the cars in a horizontal line. So the y value for each of the cars is going to be the same, but the x value each time I draw the car is going to be slightly different. So I'm going to put a variable x in here, and I'm going to fill that in a second. And my y value is going to be 100, so similar to what I have down here. So this loop takes the place of the multiple lines, or the multiple calls to the function car. So I can take those out. This loop does the same thing, except for now I'm doing it 5 times instead of 3 times. Okay, so now I need to figure out what I need to put for x. So x I'm going to have to set to an initial value, so I'm going to set x equal to 50 to begin with. So that's exactly the same as I have in the picture here. 50 pixels over is going to be my x position. And each time around in the loop then, after I draw that car at that particular xy position, I'm going to increment the value of x. So x is going to be equal to x plus, and I said that I was going to space them 150 pixels apart. Okay, so how is this function going to execute? So the first thing that I'm going to do is set x equal to 50. Then I'm going to enter into my loop. The loop is going to run 5 times. I is the counter keeping track of how many times I've run this loop. So it's first going to be 0, then it's going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, then it's going to be 3, then it's going to be 4. So when I is equal to 0, I'm going to call the car function with x is equal to 50, y is equal to 100. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to call this function with 50, 100, and it's going to draw this first car on the screen. The next thing that happens after I draw the car is I set x is equal to x plus 150. So x is now going to be 200. I come back around to my loop. I is going to be 1. Then I'm going to call the car function with x is equal to 200. Then I'm going to set x equal to x plus 150. X was equal to 200, so now x is going to be equal to 350. So it's going to move x to the right, it's going to move the next car to the right, and I'm going to execute the loop again. Okay, so let's see. So this is going to continue. It's drawing 5 cars, not 3 like I had there. So now I've drawn the first one, the second one, the third one, fourth one, fifth one. If I change this value in here to say only execute twice, it's only going to draw the first 2 cars. So the loop is going to run 2 times instead of 5 times. If I change this to 6, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. I'm going to draw 5 cars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in fact, I'm going to draw that 6th car, but it goes beyond the end of my drawing canvas. So the loop still executes, but we're not going to see that car on the drawing canvas because it's gone beyond the boundaries of my drawing canvas. Okay, so let's say that we want to put another row of cars underneath this one. Now, there's many different ways that I could approach this problem, and that's one thing that you're going to find is you may think about the problems differently than I do. That's perfectly fine. there's many different ways that I could write the code to put 2 lines of cars on this screen. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that I could approach this problem. So what I'm going to do is I want to show you the use of the range function for a slightly different purpose. So I'm going to write another loop down here to draw our second row of cars. And in this loop, I'm going to use x instead of I. And I'm using x to represent the x position of each of the cars. And I'm going to use the range function, and I'm going to use it slightly differently than I did in the last example. The last example I was using the range function simply to generate a counter. This time I'm going to use the range function to generate my x values for me. So my x value is going to start at 50, and it's going to go up to the width of my window, and it's going to increment by 150 each time. Think about the sequence that this generates. It starts at 50, and it goes up by 150. So I've got 50, 200, 350, 500, 650, and it's going up to, but not including the width of my screen. The width of my screen is, or the width of my drawing canvas is 750. So if I add 150 onto 650, I've gone beyond the width of my drawing canvas. So this is a sequence that's going to be generated by this range function. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use each of these values as my x position. So my first car is going to be drawn at 50, and then whatever my y value is going to be. My second car is going to be drawn at 200, my third car at 350, my fourth car at 500, and my fifth car at 650. I'll put it in the comments so that you can see that. Okay, so now I'm going to draw a car, and I'm going to use x here, and my y value I'm going to set as, say, 300. Okay, in this instance, in this loop, I don't need to add this extra x equals x plus 150 because that's being done already right here. So with this range function x, the first time I start this loop, x is going to be 50. When I draw the car at 50, 300, I go back up here to the for loop, and x is now going to become 200. Now I'm going to draw my car at 200, 300, etc. So it's going to go around this loop for each of these particular values. I'm going to use this value in the body of my code. Okay, so let's see what happens when I draw these. Okay, so this loop is drawing the first line of cars, and this loop is drawing the second line. So these are 2 different ways to use a for loop to do exactly the same thing. One of them is not more correct than the other. It's really just a personal preference as to how you would like to write the code. This one's a little bit cleaner, given that we only have 2 lines of code instead of 4 up here, and we don't have to define variables and increment the variables, etc. But both ways of doing this are totally acceptable. Can you think of a way that we could use one or the other of these for loops to draw both of the lines of cars with one for loop? Stop and think about that for a couple of seconds. Okay, the way that I would approach this problem is I would use this loop down here because it's quite simple and intuitive. So I'm going to remove this loop here. And what I can do is I can simply put another call to car in here. I'm going to use that same x value because both of these cars are being drawn at the same x values, but they're being drawn with different y values. So I can use one loop to set the x value. The x value is what's changing each time I go to the next car. Okay, so when we come into this loop, x takes on the value 50. So I draw a car at 50, 100, and I draw a car at 50, 300. The next time around the loop, x takes on the value 200, 150 more than it was last time, so I draw a car at 200, 100, so that's going to draw this car, and then I draw a car at 200, 300, so it draws this car. Let's just run this just to make sure that it draws what we expect it to, and yes, it does.